In our opinion, one man's trash is another man's treasure should be the slogan for every thrift store in the world. Thrift stores are magical places where you can be thrown back a couple of decades and find something that you've wanted for a very long time. If your hunt succeeds, your Goodwill finds will be something that you can definitely brag about. Fact Feed presents Lucky People Who Found the Best Things in Thrift Stores. Number 5. Vince Lombardi's Sweater. On a June afternoon in 2014, Sean and Ricky McEvoy were rifling through some bins at a Goodwill store in Asheville, North Carolina, looking for items they could resell through their vintage clothing business. Sean saw an old sweater with West Point emblazoned across the front. Thinking it looked like a vintage basketball warm-up, he tossed the sweater in the pile of goods, which they paid for by weight, 58 cents a pound. 5 months later, he was watching a documentary about Vince Lombardi, the famed coach of the Green Bay Packers, when a black and white photo flashed on the screen. The picture featured a young Lombardi during his 1949 to 1953 tenure as an assistant coach for Army's football team, wearing a West Point sweater that looked rather familiar, and Ricky had noticed just the night before that the sweater had a name tag sewn into the neck. "It wasn't Lombardi, was it?" her husband asked. "Yes, it's Lombardi," she replied. Sean nearly passed out. Sean called the NFL Hall of Fame, and when he told them of this find, they tried to convince him to donate it to them, for free. The McEvoys passed, and in February 2015, they sold the sweater to an anonymous collector for $43,020 at a New York City auction of sports memorabilia. But how did Lombardi's sweater end up at the Asheville Goodwill in the first place? It was donated by Ann Wanamaker, whose late husband, Bill Wanamaker, had coached with Lombardi at West Point for a single season in 1952, and somehow ended up with the sweater. More than 60 years later, Ann was cleaning out her house and tossed the sweater into a pile of items to donate, leading to a very lucky find for the McEvoys. "It's like winning the lottery," Sean said. Number 4. An 1823 edition of the Declaration of Independence. In March 2006, a music equipment technician named Michael Sparks was looking through the Music City thrift shop in Nashville, Tennessee, when he noticed a rolled-up yellow document, a copy of the Declaration of Independence. Sparks happily bought the document for $2.48. "I've seen Declarations of Independence in thrift stores before," Sparks said later. "This one was so beautiful that I thought it was an engraving." When he examined the paper further upon getting home, he noticed that it was marked 1823, and that it said, "By order of the government." Sparks soon learned that his thrift store purchase was an official copy of the Declaration, one of 200 commissioned by President John Quincy Adams in 1820 and printed by William Stone 3 years later. Only 35 such copies had previously been found. Sparks's declaration had been shellacked, and the varnish kept the ink dark, making his document one of the best preserved of its kind. Sparks sold the 1823 declaration to the Rainer's Historical Collectible Auctions in 2007. The winning bid? $477,650. It turns out the declaration had been donated to the Nashville thrift store by locals Stan and Linda Caffey. Stan had bought the document at a yard sale in the mid-1990s for around $2 and then hung up the declaration in his garage where he works on bicycles. His wife urged him to get rid of it, and the other items which the couple was cleaning out in their garage in 2006. "I'm happy for the Sparks guy," Stan Caffey told USA Today. "If I still had it, it would still be hanging here in the garage, and I still wouldn't know that it was worth all of that." Number 3. A Picasso Print. In early 2012, Zach Bodish, an avid thrifter, was tracing his usual route through the Volunteers of America store in Clintonville, Ohio, looking for items to fix up and sell when he came across a framed poster for a 1958 Picasso exhibition. Penciled in the lower left corner was the notation 6/100, suggesting that the print was a numbered edition. Scrawled on the back were a few lines in French which Bodish couldn't read, though the word original looked promising. Bodish shelled out for $14.14 for the poster and frame, and once he got home, he started Googling. He soon realized that he had gotten his hands on a lino-cut poster created by Picasso for an exhibition of his ceramics in the French village of Villares in 1958, of which only 100 had been produced, and as for that writing on the back, it meant original print signed proof. A faded red scribble in the corner of the print was Picasso's signature. "I started shaking a little bit," Bodish recalled. The poster he had found had not only been a limited edition, but an artist's proof for one of a batch of initial prints that are approved by the artist before printing the other copies for the series. "You could have knocked me over with a feather," Bodish wrote on his blog. He initially thought the poster might have been worth $3,000 to $4,000, but after having the print authenticated, he sold it for $7,000 in a private sale. After an article in the Columbus Dispatch highlighted Bodish's thrift shop discovery, a retired English teacher from Columbus named Ed Zettler contacted the paper saying that he was the one who donated the print, which he thought was simply a reproduction. According to Zettler, a friend had given him the Picasso print as a housewarming gift in the 1960s, and it had sat in his basement for decades before he decided to donate it while he was clearing out his house. But Zettler had no hard feelings toward Bodish, telling Today, "That's the risk you take when you bring something to the thrift store." Number 2. A Jaeger LeCoultre watch. When Zach Norris saw a diving watch marked LeCoultre at a Phoenix Goodwill in January 2015, he knew he'd come across something valuable. He didn't want to let it go. Produced by Swiss luxury watch brand Jaeger LeCoultre, whose modern timepieces sell for thousands of dollars, this vintage watch is tagged just $5.99. "I didn't even want to give it to the cashier to scan," Norris told KTVK. "I was like, you can scan it in my hand if you want to," though he knew the vintage Jaeger LeCoultre diving watches were worth thousands to collectors. Norris soon discovered that his watch was particularly special, a model called LeCoultre Deep Sea Alarm. Produced in the beginning of 1959, the model was one of the first watches with an alarm for divers to use, and less than 1,000 of them were ever made. Norris had the watch authenticated by a local Jaeger LeCoultre dealer, and after a website for watch collectors called Hoodink highlighted Norris's find, he was flooded with questions and offers to buy it. Norris accepted an offer from Eric Koo, a San Francisco-based vintage Rolex dealer and watch enthusiast, for $35,000, plus an Omega Speedmaster Professional worth $4,000, a watch Norris had long desired. In addition to donating a portion of his profits back to Goodwill, Norris earmarked a good chunk of his earnings to pay for his wedding the following fall. Number 1. A Philip Treacy handbag. In February 2012, John Richard was browsing at an Oxfam charity shop in London when he opened a dusty box and discovered an eye-catching handbag. The 73-year-old retired chef was intrigued by the bag's print. Images of Elvis Presley by Andy Warhol rendered in shades of brown, and he decided to take it home. Though he balked momentarily at the listed price of €20, about $26, he tried to haggle the cashier down to €15, but decided to make the splurge when he refused to budge. Still, he put the bag aside, and once he got home, he didn't think about it for several months. Remembering the bag later on that year, Richard examined it and noticed a Philip Treacy label. Treacy is an Irish designer, best known for making sculptural hats, including one Princess Beatrice wore, to much mockery, to the royal wedding of Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. A luxury designer handbag? Might it be worth some money? Richard contacted the Philip Treacy shop in London and asked them to examine the bag. Store manager Guy Burnett confirmed that it was a hand-sewn limited edition Treacy design, which only 10 were ever made. "It's a piece of art, not a bag," Burnett said. Richard had the handbag appraised at €350,000, and he told reporters that he'd received 2 offers for €250,000, which adds up to $325,000, and €350,000, which adds up to $455,000, from buyers in China. "I'm rather glad I didn't put it back now," Richard told the Daily Express.